Actor Michael Pitt, best known for Boardwalk Empire, Dawson's Creek, he has been charged with sexually assaulting and violently attacking an unnamed woman in a series of incidents spanning more than a year, allegedly striking her with a cinder block, a 4x4, and even strangling her. I'm going to break down the horrifying details inside the official indictment for you right now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Okay, so actor Michael Pitt, who's best known for his roles in Boardwalk Empire, Dawson's Creek, Hannibal, he is now facing some very serious criminal charges stemming from a series of alleged violent incidents. Some outlets are reporting it may be his ex-girlfriend. We couldn't confirm that independently. But according to Brooklyn prosecutors, Pitt is accused of sexually assaulting this woman, attacking her multiple times over a span of more than a year, including striking her with a cinder block and a 4x4. Those are the allegations. Now, the 44-year-old actor was arrested on May 2nd, arraigned today, May 7th, in Brooklyn Supreme Court. He's pleaded not guilty to a total of 9 charges. Those are 2 counts of first-degree sexual abuse, 2 counts of criminal sex acts, one in the first degree, another in the third degree, 2 counts of assault in the second degree, 2 counts of attempted assault in the second degree, and strangulation in the second degree. Now, that is all inside the official indictment that was obtained by Law&Crime. We're going to go through it a bit, but get this. The Honorable Judge Joanne Quijones set his bail at just $15,000, which Pitt posted before being released from custody. So Pitt was indicted by a Kings County grand jury on charges stemming from 4 alleged domestic incidents that occurred between April of 2020 and August of 2021. According to the indictment, prosecutors allege that Pitt forcibly groped an alleged victim in one incident, sexually assaulted her and struck her with a cinder block in another, hit her with a 4x4, potentially a wooden plank on a separate occasion, and then strangled her in this final alleged attack. Again, we believe this is all in relation to one alleged victim. I want to bring on Sarena Townsend, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, to break this down. Sarena, thanks so much for taking the time. What do you make of this news? What do you make of these charges?
Thanks so much for having me. It's interesting for me. This was the office that I actually prosecuted in for 10 years, these very types of crimes. So I make of the charges. Look, first of all, it's an ex-indictment, what's called an ex-indictment. That means he was not arrested and then indicted. He was indicted in secret. He didn't know this was coming, presumably. They gathered up a grand jury, they indicted him without an arrest, and now he's being arraigned and first told what he's being arrested for. These are pretty serious charges.
Why do it that way?
There's a few different strategies regarding why doing it this way. One of the biggest reasons why a prosecution does it this way is that the accused doesn't know that it's happening, and therefore they can't get in front of the grand jury and tell their side of the story. It's a bit shady, but it does happen. Without that notice, they don't know, and they're not going to be able to go in front of the grand jury and tell their side.
Is that also possibility they were concerned he might run away, he might do something violent? Is that also a possibility? I mean, because considering what the charges are here.
Sometimes there's a reason for it that's different than just the surprise element.
Right.
Sometimes people are indicted that way for that reason too.
Why do you think the bail was quite low for the charges here? I mean, they are only allegations, but what do you make of the bail?
It's interesting. I do think that these charges tend to come with higher bail. That being said, a judge is going to take many, many things into consideration, the top of which is his reliability in coming back to court. He obviously doesn't have a criminal record. He doesn't have a history of bail jumping or not showing up to court. And although, these are serious charges, it is his first time being charged with something like this. And there's really probably no evidence that a judge can hang on to that says he's not going to show up again. He obviously wants to vigorously fight the charges. He's hired an attorney for that reason. So I think the bail is low for that reason.
Hey, everybody, this is another Law&Crime legal alert. Did you know that children are being diagnosed with serious conditions like type 2 diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and the research is potentially linking ultra-processed foods to this? Yeah, well, Morgan & Morgan is stepping in to fight to hold these food companies accountable. With decades of experience fighting large corporations, they are ready to stand up for the families who deserve justice. So if your child under 21 has been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or fatty liver disease, then visit www.forthepeople.com/food or scan the QR code on screen to learn more. We're going to talk about his history in a minute, but these are very, very specific. So when you look at, for example, sexual abuse in the first degree, the defendant, Michael Pitt, on or about between April 19th, 2020 and April 20th, 2020, subjected the alleged victim to sexual contact, namely by touching the defendant's finger to a specific region of the body by means of forcible compulsion. The charges of criminal sex acts specific to where the defendant, Michael Pitt, on or about August 5th, 2020, engaged in oral sexual conduct with the alleged victim by means of forcible compulsion. Because it's so specific, do you feel this is all coming from who this alleged victim is? The majority of this evidence has to be proven through her testimony?
100%. First of all, it looks like these incidents are alleged to have happened a long time ago. And so if it's just coming out now, there's a high probability that they don't have forensic evidence. They probably don't have surveillance video or things that are concrete in that way. Most likely, everything that's coming out for the most part is coming from the word of the accused, of the accuser.
But I feel like they have to have more, or maybe not, to move forward with charges. Could you charge someone purely based on the account of someone if there's not digital evidence, forensic evidence? I remember the Harvey Weinstein trial, right? A lot of those crimes that he was convicted of, there wasn't, this happened back in the day, there wasn't that kind of documentation. So it could be purely based on her account.
It absolutely could. The burden of proof is proof beyond a reasonable doubt, but a judge will tell the jury that if all there is one witness, you can still convict somebody by proof beyond a reasonable doubt if you find that that witness is credible. Most times, a prosecutor's office wants more. They want some sort of corroboration, something, a witness, some evidence, some medical evidence, something that could corroborate the statements that were made. Perhaps if she was in fact injured, she went to the hospital and there are medical records to show that she was injured. They'll hinge on to latch on to something like that above and beyond her testimony.
And to be clear, we don't know what they have. This indictment is quite bare bones, as it typically is. So we don't know what the supporting documentation may be, if any. What does forcible compulsion mean?
Essentially, it means without consent and by force. And so it could be physical force, it could be manipulative force. Case law has supported many different types of force to sustain a forcible compulsion charge. But for the most part, it's differentiated in a way where it's either forcibly done, like physically, or manipulatively. So as opposed to she was either too drunk to consent or she was incapacitated, the forcible compulsion comes from his actions, allegedly.
We're going to talk about what his legal representative said in a minute, but in terms of a defense, I would imagine A, this didn't happen, or B, it was all consensual, right? If this is in fact his ex-girlfriend, again, can't confirm it, or a romantic partner of some kind, is it difficult for a prosecutor to prove forcible compulsion?
It could be. And so many things play into that. The amount of time it took between the alleged act itself, and when she outcried, when she told people. There are a lot of studies and experts who will tell you that delayed outcry doesn't necessarily mean that the person is not credible. However, a jury tends to be concerned if a person doesn't complain immediately about the event in question. And so I do think that with the delay, and if there really is no corroborative evidence, it could be difficult for prosecutors to be able to prove the force. Again, medical records is one of the most compelling pieces of evidence when you're claiming forcible compulsion, because if there's injury, that would help.
But if there were medical records, wouldn't there be an obligation on the part of medical staff to inform police?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times one would think that they do have that obligation, but sometimes complainants are not cooperative, and sometimes a medical professional doesn't take it into their own hands. It's a little bit different when you're dealing with an adult rather than a child, for example.
Sure.
And so if she didn't want to cooperate at that time, it's possible that it just simply didn't go through at that time.
So I think the count of criminal sex act in the third degree is interesting. This is what it reads. The defendant, Michael Pitt, on or about August 5th, 2020, engaged in oral sexual conduct with alleged victim without such person's consent, and such lack of consent was by reason of some factor other than incapacity to consent. That is different wording than we talked about with forcible compulsion. What do you take away from that? What does that mean?
Yeah, it's a little bit lighter. It's a tinge lighter in its content. And that's why there is a less violent degree, a lower degree, a degree that is not punished as aggressively as a degree that involves forcible compulsion. But essentially, it means it's almost like a no means no type of charge, where it's like she didn't consent, but at the same time, she was capable of consent and it wasn't necessarily by force. So there's a way to kind of squeeze in that charge without it having to be as violent or as aggressive as the higher charged count.
And then you move on to the assault and attempted assault charges, right? Second degree, one with respect to a cinder block, the other with respect to a 4x4. The fact that prosecutors have charged here and got an indictment for attempted assault and assault, again, very, very specific right here, Sarena, about what he allegedly did with those items.
That's right. So when you talk about assault in the second degree typically means, and in this case means, that it was an assault with a deadly weapon or a dangerous instrument, as opposed to, say, a bar fight where somebody punches somebody out. That would be a misdemeanor assault in the third degree. However, it was a strategic move for the prosecution to charge both the assault in the second degree and attempted assault in the second degree, because what they're doing is kind of couching it in such a way where if they can't necessarily prove that that weapon was used or that the injury was bad enough, that they'll potentially get the jury to compromise and agree with the attempted assault.
That's an interesting point. I didn't think about that. For me, it felt almost as if they're describing, this person's describing an episode where, just for argument's sake, let's say he allegedly took a 4x4, swung it, missed, or made contact, or picked it up, different moments in that episode of what could potentially be quite a harrowing account. Count 9, last one, alleged strangulation, believed to have occurred on August 7th, 2021. Indictment reads, the defendant Michael Pitt, on or about August 7th, 2021, with intent to impede the normal breathing or circulation of the blood of another person, namely alleged victim, applied pressure on the throat or neck of alleged victim and thereby caused stupor, loss of consciousness for any period of time, or any other physical injury or impairment. And by the way, his legal team has strongly denied these latest accusations. Now, some outlets say this statement is from his attorney, Jason Goldman. Others say it's from Carrie London. Not exactly sure who made the statement. Again, different outlets saying different things, but the statement reads, unfortunately, we live in a world where somebody like Mr. Pitt, an accomplished professional who would never so much as contemplate these crimes, can be arrested on the uncorroborated word of an unhinged individual. In reality, this baseless claim is suspiciously raised some 4 or 5 years after the alleged incident, at a time when the two parties were in a completely consensual and voluntary relationship. This case will be dismissed. Now, it's also possible that one attorney spoke to one outlet, one attorney spoke to other outlets, and they basically had the same statement. But Sarena, what do you take away from that statement?
It's a very aggressive stance. First of all, I know both of these fine attorneys, and they're excellent at their jobs. Like I said, this is kind of my home territory here, and it sounds like they're holding no punches. It sounds like they are really going aggressively towards this, and it seems like they're almost committing at this point to their defense of it being consensual. Sometimes your defense is it wasn't me. Sometimes your defense is, it's there's a lot of different defenses that one could take, but here they're claiming it's consensual. Usually, if you take that aggressive a stance at the outset, you stick with it because you've made those statements publicly, and so they're attacking her credibility. They are mentioning the delayed outcry, the delay in pressing charges. And I'm sure they're going to also want to, mention the fact later on that this was done in secret without him having the opportunity to defend himself in the grand jury. And so, yeah, they are taking a pretty aggressive stance, calling her unhinged and going full force with this defense.
And Sarena, this is not the first time that this actor has been in some legal trouble. So Deadline reports that he was arrested in July of 2022, charged with assault and petty larceny for allegedly hitting a man several times, stealing his phone. Later that same year, he was hospitalized after being accused of throwing items at pedestrians from a rooftop in Bushwick. He was deemed to be emotionally disturbed. No charges were filed, as far as our understanding, but how does any of that factor into the current charges or the current case?
It's a great question. It could factor in and it may not. So it could factor in as a prior bad act if this case goes to trial. That's what we call like, Molyneux information, where somebody could testify that he did violent things in the past. Then again, a judge has to balance the prejudicial value of that information, because if it's just what we call propensity evidence, it's problematic and it's not allowed in front of a jury. What I mean by that is a judge is not going to allow somebody to just get up there and say, oh, he's done bad things before, therefore you should convict him of this because he must have done it again. They have to prove the case on the evidence of this case and not on evidence of prior bad acts only. So there's a balancing that a judge will have to do with respect to his past.
And Sarena, before I let you go, talking about this case, the charges he's facing, what could he be facing if he's convicted?
I mean, I think the top count is a B felony, and he doesn't have a past, but at the same time, those carry very, very double digits in prison.
Wow.
Again, right. I mean, it's very high. Then again, because of the fact that he doesn't technically have a criminal record, oftentimes a prosecution will offer a plea deal that's much lower than the top count and much lower than the top amount of time. Time will tell with respect to whether he actually wants to admit guilt and take that plea, or if he's going to take this all the way to trial.
That's a good point. I mean, for now, he remains free on bail. He's due back in court on June 17th, and he may want to keep pushing this trial date, forward, and maybe not go to trial. Maybe wants to go to trial. Maybe wants to make his case. Maybe wants to take a deal. It's way too early to know what to make of all this. It's just shocking news, to say the least. But Sarena Townsend, thank you so much for coming on and breaking down what is a really disturbing new set of allegations for us.
Thank you so much, Jesse.
And that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.